Well, I'd like to welcome you all today to this, our third in a series of forums on homelessness. And I am very happy to see all of you here today. We have already done a forum on homeless people who are in families, and we've already done a forum on homeless people who are in shelters and in transitional housing. Today, the topic for our forum are homeless individuals who, for a variety of reasons, are not able to be in or choose not to go into shelters and or transitional housing. Come on in, please, come. Hi, Ginny. There's agendas on the table back there. These forums are being sponsored by the Missoula League of Women Voters. And if any of you are interested in more information about the League, there's some more information on that down back on the table back there. So we have with us today a very amazing group of people. And I just want to say that when I first met Travis, he was actually midstream in doing what he does, which is taking calls and helping to locate and smooth out situations, coming up with various people who in Missoula who don't have a place to live and for various reasons are trying to make it out there on the streets. And I have just been totally awed by everything I've learned since then about what Missoula is doing and about the magnitude of what we have in front of us as problems as well. So with that brief introduction, again, our focus today is on individuals who are homeless, who for various reasons cannot go into shelters and into transitional housing. Our first speaker is Marnie Kruger. Marnie was formerly homeless, and so I'm very happy to have him here to give us some first-hand information about what that experience is and what that means to a person. Our other speakers include Robert Sheban, who's with the Missoula Police Department as their crime prevention officer, and Travis Mateer, who is the team leader of the Poverello Center Homeless Outreach Team, which actually has the acronym HOT team. So if you say Homeless Outreach Team, the HOT team, you're saying it twice, but that's good because it's very important that we have that team. And then on the end we have Michael Moore, who is the coordinator for the Reaching Home project, which is Missoula's 10-year plan to end homelessness. So we'll be hearing from all of them during the course of the next hour. We're going to start with the question of who are homeless individuals and what kinds of challenges do these homeless people face, how do they become homeless? And to start off, we're going to have Marnie Kruger.
Hi, my name is Marnie. Last time I was homeless was last year. I moved into a place in December, and I got housing through a voucher system, Shelter Care Plus, that Teresa Williams helped orchestrate for me. My homelessness was due to my mental deterioration, but I can speak of all my experiences, but my experiences don't speak for all. I put myself where I was because I needed to humble in certain ways, and my behaviors were getting out of hand. So, as far as challenges go, yeah, there's some, but what I keep in perspective is that everybody's not on the same playing field when it comes to abilities. Now, abilities is not your lack of or whatever, is nothing to really be ashamed of. What it is do we have a government that's going to help be that holding hand? Because you have people that constantly need handouts. That means they'll never have the ability to sustain themselves. Then there's people like me, you just give me a hand up and I can pay you back to interest. You know, I've already signed off on promissory notes before, so it's okay. But not everybody's on the same page. And the thing I discussed with Travis is that in his situation with Poverello, and all the staff members there is they're put really in an unfair situation. They're not, they can succeed in certain ways, but where they fail is not really their fault. You know, for instance, you know, Missoula is very transient on a lot of levels. So you get dangerous type people in there that could pose harm to themselves and people around them. They should really go somewhere else. But what's brought up is the shutting down of mental hospitals, the shutting down of housing people and whatnot. So it puts them out there in the street where they can be a menace or danger to everyone because they're not good at controlling themselves. They have no self-will. So to me, when you say homelessness, that's just a station in life. That doesn't color you as a person. Because some of the people that we see as successes, like poets, physics majors, sometimes they go on a spree of homelessness. You know, rock stars, whoever person you look up to as a pinnacle of success, sometimes they've hit rock bottom. So what they don't need is our patronization. They don't need to be talked down to like they're children, even if they're behaving like them. You know, you empower a person when they have a sense of self-dignity. But if they lack it, then you should, you know, I would imagine most everyone in here has a sense of humanity, or else you wouldn't be in the fields that you're in. That's all I got to say, unless anybody's got questions for me.
And we'll take questions after there's a lot, okay? You can
Should I just
stand.
move the whole
Yeah.
thing? Okay.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Sheeman. I'm the Crime Prevention Officer for the Missoula Police Department. I've been in law enforcement for 17 years. I'm just going to give you a quick little background why I'm here. My introduction to this issue came in 2009. The Mayor's Downtown Advisory Committee was put together, comprising of the Police Department, City Attorney's Office, and it was to take on aggressive panhandling and undesirable behaviors, and primarily in our downtown area. We call those in police work quality of life issues. Basically, one of the things that these quality of life issues cause is what we call the fear of crime. And the fear of crime can have a big effect on people. It can affect whether or not you go downtown to shop, whether or not you go want to open a business downtown, whether or not you just want to go for a lunchtime stroll. So it's very important. What we classify these smaller little crimes, they're very important to us in the police department because they make people feel safe or not feel safe. And that has actually driven people to even sell their homes and leave communities because they just felt unsafe, right? And even though there's statistics that show, say the police, if you come up to me and you say, I feel unsafe in my community, and I show you statistics that show otherwise, it means nothing. It means nothing to you because we haven't done our job to make you feel safe. So that's how this whole thing kind of transpired, and that's how I've got into it. So to be honest with you, in 2009, taking on this panhandling issue, I felt it was going to take me about a month to figure this out. Piece of cake, right? So here we are 5 years later, still talking about it. I'm going to use this word, I'm probably going to use it way too much, but collaboration is the key. The police department can't solve the problems, the POP can't solve all these problems. It's a nationwide issue. I grew up in the outskirts of New York. I saw it firsthand in the 1970s. You know, I experienced that fear of crime when I was growing up in New York. My dad did not believe in cars with air conditioning. I think up until 1995 didn't believe in cars with air conditioning. So as a kid, I remember going through New York City with the windows down, lots of scary folks sticking their hands in our car. So that fear of crime has kind of stayed with me as a child, and I still remember those incidences. So little things like graffiti, people sticking their hands in your cars, things like that. You know, it may not make the front page of the newspaper because we still kind of classify those as little crimes, but they're very important. So that's how I've gotten involved in this. So there's a quick little history. So basically, what we were seeing, and the police department was seeing these complaints that were generated from our downtown area. The police department really didn't have a solution at the time. They seemed to be falling through the cracks. So They weren't what's called a 45 or criminal code. It's a Montana state code. We were finding that these complaints weren't quite falling in the category of a state disorderly conduct code, and they weren't quite falling into what we had on the books for city ordinances. So I'll give you an example, like where a person feels that they can't escape an area as easy as you're, say, getting in and out of your car in a parking lot, or you're approaching a business and you're getting in that little vestibule. What a spot for a person to try and take advantage of somebody, right? Because it's very difficult to get out of that area, and especially when you're entering and exiting out of your car, very difficult, because we're thinking about making sure we don't lock our keys in the car, making sure we lock our car, making sure our purse isn't out there where people can see. So when we had those complaints, and nothing's worse than a police officer saying to themselves, there's really nothing I can do, or saying it to the victim, there's nothing I can do. So that was very frustrating. So we all got together, we figured out changing some city ordinance. It was definitely one of the things that we did back in '09, and hopefully we're pretty successful about it. So so there's the background on how I've gotten involved in this, and as I said, 5 years later, I figured it was going to take up a good part of my December in '09, and then ended up being a 5-year thing that we're still working on. But it's about collaboration. It's about groups getting together and working on the problem together. No one agency, whether it be government agency or a private business, can solve this problem. It's obviously nationwide. It's in little towns smaller than Missoula. It's in bigger towns as big as New York City, okay? So, and there's tons of different ways of fixing or going after this problem. So, so we deal with maybe a little bit different aspect of it. We deal with what's called, generally speaking, the chronic homeless or the shelter resistant. When you kind of made mention the kind of the whole category of homeless is you can't all group everybody into one. The 10 to 20% of that chronic shelter resistant persons are generally the folks that we deal with out on the streets. So the chronic homeless take up a lot of resources for us. They take up a lot of resources for everybody here. And we see folks mainly with substance abuse issues and poor health care or mental health care. So we are the first responders. And then question number 2, when we get into it later, I'll talk about some of the things that we can also provide for these folks. Thanks.
Bob.
Hi there, thank you everyone for being here today. My name is Travis and I've been with the Poverty Center for 5 years. What got me interested in doing this work was actually a relationship I built with a Vietnam veteran who would sit on the footbridge by campus. And so he was a vet, he drank and smoked marijuana pretty regularly, and he was one of our year-round guys out on the streets. And I say that year-round because we definitely have different populations. We have folks that are on the streets even in the winter months, and then we also have a sort of seasonal population that comes through in the warmer summer months through town. And there's actually interesting conflicts even among the different populations of folks on the streets. This particular gentleman got pretty frustrated in the summertime when people would come through and leave trash. He actually picked up a lot of trash in that area. He was an artist. He did this amazing intricate ink drawings that he would sell for $10 a piece. He didn't see himself necessarily as homeless. He definitely wanted to emphasize he was in the situation by choice. This is how he chose to live. So some people are on the streets by choice. I don't think that's the large percentage of folks. Like Rob said, there's a lot of substance abuse and lack of access to mental health services that create barriers to services. There's also a pretty large percentage of the Native population among the people on the streets that are on and off the res, have family connections in the state, but for whatever reasons are just not able to be in a stable housing situation. And then Missoula is sort of known for being a generous community that gives money to folks. And so the downtown area, part of the challenge is that it's pretty easy to make money, especially in the evening and nighttime in the bar scene. There's a lot of interesting dynamics between people out at the bars and the loose change that makes it into the pockets of folks on the streets. And so the substance abuse issue is really, really significant. Alcohol specifically. Before I started working at the Poverello Center, I had no idea the destructive capacity of alcohol. I didn't realize that people could die from withdrawing, they could have seizures, hallucinations. Really, through the work that we've been doing, the barrier of that particular substance, I think, is so significant. It tends to be what we talk about a lot when it comes to barriers to services. We also have, I think, just a big challenge in kind of building relationships with individuals. When the interactions that people on the streets are having are primarily with folks that are paid to see them as a problem, that can be a big challenge. And so one of the huge benefits of our program and having volunteers that are choosing to spend their time to come out and get to know more about the histories of people on the streets, it's been really, really, really positive because folks on the streets are pretty savvy. They know that this is my job. And they know that when we come out with volunteers, that the volunteers are spending their own time to try and understand the issues a bit more. And so it's been really positive to have a diversity within our volunteer base because we have folks that are in recovery themselves, that have lived the experiences. We have people that have spent time in incarceration. And so when a person on the street says, Travis, what do you know about being on the streets? I can say, not much. I'm a privileged white male that have not had the challenging experiences in my life. But our volunteers oftentimes know what that's like. And so it's been really great to get to understand a bit more about what lived experiences people on the streets have. And how you can start making some better changes in the systems that we have to respond to the needs. So I look forward to continuing that conversation and to collaborating because, as Rob said, I think collaboration really is the key. Finding ways to support each other instead of, I think, just pointing fingers and saying this isn't working and this isn't working. We can start really addressing collaborative approaches on the way forward. So that's what I'm excited about.
I'm not on the.
He's in the second half.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, this is an opportunity for questions and discussion to understand more about homelessness itself. I know, Marty, you were shaking your head in agreement on a couple of points as Travis was talking.
Right.
What came to mind when he was saying that?
Well, I agree. I agree a lot with what Travis has. And, you don't have to actually experience homelessness to be a help to someone homeless. There's a time and place for all that. So Travis and I have a history. I've made some boo-boos. It's not him. I was just out of my mind. So he was patient, dealt with me. Teresa's been a big help. So yeah, Missoula, all the places I've been around in this country, it's a town with a heart and people are generous. They just don't like it when things get ugly physically, whether it's graffiti like he mentioned or actual physical confrontations, because that robs everyone else of their freedoms. So safety is a big issue, and some homeless people are dangerous, just like some guy in a suit and tie on a penthouse. So it's all the different, every subculture has its hierarchy. So, and alcohol is a real big challenge because, every place will take them in, but they're watching the behavior. If the behavior's not suitable, you're out. So there is, people say, well, it's cruel to kick them out. They'll freeze to death. Well, they made the choice to put the bottle to the mouth. Now it's in police hands, and they'll lock you up.
Marnie,
Yeah.
could you just give just like a quick Reader's Digest version of how you came off the streets and what it took to get you there?
Well, basically, I had to go experience hell for 2 weeks. I went to San Francisco, and 10 out of the 14 days I was there, I got to see it from behind San Francisco County jail bars. And they sent me to a mental hospital for 3 days. That's where I was diagnosed psychotic. So they kept me on the psych floor in jail. So I was homeless there. I was just hurting a lot, but I was in a big, ugly town with more problems than I could shake a stick at. So I got out and I came back here, but I was still deteriorating. So my experience with the Missoula police has actually been pretty favorable. I mean, people should feel fortunate. I mean, yeah, you're gonna get a cop that's gonna throw some attitude, throw a book, whatever. You know, they're human too. I don't give them a reason to rough me up. I know when I'm in trouble. They're all over 6 foot, 250 pounds. They already got the cuffs out, and I don't resist.
Not you, Bob.
But, you know, the nice pudgy cop just checking on you. You know, he's not the muscle. No, you can't pet him. No, don't do that. Don't bribe him either. But, it's, I hang with everyone. So I hear the word on the street, their concerns and whatnot. But I just try to encourage the right direction. I've gotten a couple people on the program with Teresa. So what starts the initial change? Well, if you're a person that has ability, that's no problem. All you need is desire and motivation. Now, someone that doesn't have a will, unfortunately, they're gonna get locked up in either Warm Springs State Mental Hospital, or they're locked up in jail, because, well, they're bad. You gotta do it pretty bad to go to a big house. So, it's not rehabilitation. So some people look at it like, well, what are we doing? Are we open up more jail cells or more rooms? Well, it just depends. You know, unfortunately, we have to have prisons because people are at the point that you can't control them at all. So you cage them up like an animal. But you shouldn't treat them like, you know, with abuse. I'm not for that. You can still do it humanely. We used to have, you know, sanatoriums and whatnot. So if they're totally checked out to partially whatever, you know, we got a long ways, a lot of problems, but it'll present challenges and it'll open new doors for people that want to pursue that.
There's a question out here? Yes.
Not really a question, a comment. Marty, you're sure not the hardcore homeless, because I know the people on the street people, and unless you change your appearance quite a lot, no beard or anything, and we just talked.
Well, I'm a bit of a chameleon. Well, you gotta remember, I'm diagnosed psychotic.
Have
so
you seen
there's
me
a few of me in here.
Have you seen me on the street? Have you seen me on the street talking with the street people?
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
Right.
No, your face looks a little
Yeah,
familiar.
'cause-
If I don't see your face more than a couple
Because
times.
I know
Right.
them, and the hardcore homeless.
No, see, I didn't accept it as a way of life, but I wasn't ashamed to be around people like that.
Right.
I mean, I was homeless with my mother because she had a nervous breakdown after a divorce.
Yeah.
But we weren't really homeless. We stayed in shelters, couch surfed.
Sure.
I mean, I've been out there in cold
Well, I
temps,
believe that.
but it was still fall.
Yeah.
And I knew I didn't have the materials to keep myself from getting hypothermia, and I'm just not that smart out there, you know? So some people, they're rugged and they like that kind of living. They choose it, but they, you know, again, it just depends on the behavior. If they keep the property clean and they're not out there drawing the wrong kind of attention, the police department ain't gonna have a problem with them. Matter of fact, some of them camp out behind the university on their property and they're okay with it. Don't burn the whole forest down. Don't be selling your drugs and stuff like that and trashing the place out. That ruins it for everyone. Because the police department, they're reactionary, not preventative. We're preventative, right? So if you work your squabble out before Missoula's finest get there, that's better for you. They're just doing their job. And they can do their job the wicked way, or they can always make it harder on you, right?
Preventative is
Well, they got that nice little black chair in there. If you can't control your limbs or anything, you go right in that chair and they'll just wait you out till you come through. So, but for the most part, I would say people that are homeless, the majority of them, I mean, he's mentioned 10–20%. Yes, there are statistics. Nobody likes to be thought of as a statistic, a number, because it's impersonal. But yeah, you're gonna have the antipodes, anywhere from the worst to the best, and the gray matter makes up the popular count. So most homeless people are not really a threat to others around them. But you're always gonna have the ones that wanna lay out there and reek of booze and pee on the sidewalk and harass people. And he's been in big cities where they'll actually come up and break your glass or, you know, nearly carjack you. They get really aggressive. And that's what Missoula doesn't want, because Missoula is basically a family town. I mean, it's got a college in it, people's children and people working on their back in their life and stuff. So people have to feel free to have some mobility with safety. And if you don't have a good police force in place, yeah, you're like Chicago, Philadelphia, Kansas City, St. Louis. There's neighborhoods cops won't even go into. It's like, now you getting shot on my shift. No way, Frank, we're gonna pull around and bust these kids with pot and they're gonna have a good time. But, you know, in a town like Missoula, it's not big city, but you get some big city folks that roll through. Yeah, they're transporting drugs like meth and all kinds of stuff to cook your kids' heads with. And they don't take malpractice insurance, like a doctor, right? So drugs are a big problem in any town now, not just big cities. A little town like Missoula, you start seeing 6-foot chain link fences going up and you got hypodermic needles in the yard and stuff. Yeah, you better board up and move out, just like he said. They want that. Missoula's, I can see how they're improving the look of the place, and then pretty soon the feel of the place will get there and it all matches. You know, if I went to a board meeting of CEOs dressed like this, it'd be like a slap in the face, right? So you gotta show respect if you want it. That's all I got.
Any other questions for the first part of the panel? Okay, well, the second part, we're going to talk about more of the programs and what people do to try to work with the situation. And I think Rob, actually we'll start with Michael, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the 10-year plan, and particularly how the 10-year plan is evolving in this particular arena with this percentage of homeless who, for whatever reason, can't use shelters.
Yeah, once again, thanks to everybody for coming. And Teresa, I think maybe it was a brilliant move on your part to have Marty come up. Although I would have preferred you to be up here taking my place, because you know way more about it. The 10-year plan, you know, it looks across the full spectrum of people who are homeless. As we've talked about here today, everybody's made some reference to a number of 10, 15%. That is the percentage nationwide, and it's the percentage here of people that represent the sort of the most difficult to house, chronically addicted, mental health, long-term mental health challenges.
That's the
So that is definitely a part of our demographic here, and it's a part that as a community we spend a ton of money on. The number that you see most often thrown around, and the number that we found to be relatively true here in Missoula, is that hardcore 10% is going to take up 50% of your resources. So if you look at a community that spends millions and millions of dollars on homeless people, well, half those millions of dollars are being spent on a pretty small sliver of the population. What happens because of that is that we have a huge part of our homeless population, and it's nearly 50% that are families, kids, moms, people with jobs, who, if with a little more resources, we can actually get those people housed. This year we're fortunate enough to have some rental assistance programs that are gonna let us sort of cherry pick the best of the people who are currently homeless in Missoula. Through a program at Word, we've spent about $20,000 on rental assistance. We've qualified and or housed 23 families and or individuals. That adds up to about 55 to 60 people in 2 months. We have another $180,000 that will be spent on this same population in the next year. It seems possible to us that we would house in the neighborhood of 200 people. That's out of a total homeless population of between 500 and 600. Those are good numbers, and yet we're picking off the easy part. We're picking off people who have jobs, who have Social Security disability, maybe have a mental health disability, some sort of semi-steady income
Tommy
stream.
Charleston, if you're in the library, please come to the accounts desk. Tommy Charleston.
Everybody heard that, right? Wasn't just me. No. So the 10-year plan envisions that, the goal is to end homelessness. And again, I always joke that we know we're not gonna end homelessness because we're not gonna end poverty, we're not gonna end income inequality, but we're gonna do our best. We've been asked as a community in a way to hold a never-ending bake sale to take care of our most vulnerable citizens. And I just tell people, that's not the way I would pick to do it, but since we're holding a bake sale, we may as well have a damn good one. So, the plan envisions this percentage of the population that we're talking about in sort of years 5 through 10. What has happened more recently is that the downtown discussion has gotten a little more acute. We recently, through the Downtown Advisory Commission and the City Council, made a run at redoing some of our sit, sleep, lie ordinance, aggressive panhandling ordinance downtown in an effort to kind of move the problem around. I mean, we talk a lot about addressing behaviors, and I do think it is about behaviors, but it's also about where people are and how people interact with those people. That effort ultimately did not succeed in the way that I think a lot of people envisioned that it might. But what it did do was it pushed us into a more urgent and a quicker conversation about what do you do with this population if you can't sort of move them to the edge of the sidewalk or move them to Karis Park or wherever they may have happened to gone once we change the number of feet that you had to be away from a doorway. So most recently we have had a sort of ramped up discussion of what's called wet housing. And that's not the PC term for it, but it is the term that everybody's using. It was at the budget games this year. I mean, we prefer to call it permanent supportive housing for people with chronic addictions or issues. And the fact is almost everybody in town is calling it wet housing. It's not a secret what the wet part refers to. This is housing for people that are gonna continue to use alcohol, perhaps continue to use drugs, not necessarily go into mental health treatment, not go into addiction treatment right away. Obviously, the long-term hope there is that we will get them there, but this is sort of no conditions housing. And so I think it was a really interesting discussion last week at the Downtown Advisory Commission. It's like, well, if not regulation, if not police response, then what? And part of the what is gonna wind up being some sort of housing that is gonna make it possible for people to not necessarily curb their current impulses, but we're gonna get them inside. If we don't get them inside, we're gonna keep spending money the way we've spent money here over the last 30 years, which is kind of throwing money at a bunch of Band-Aids that we know for a fact do not fix the problem. We've got Yo here today who's been working at St. Patrick and trying to help them deal with their homeless population and how they treat them and what they do with them once they go out the door and trying to make sure that they don't keep coming back. We have people that are frequent flyers that spend tens and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year coming into the emergency room. All the numbers show you across the country there's communities that are 5 to 8 years ahead of us and communities that have developed wet housing programs. What happens is you immediately see a huge downturn in entrance rates at hospitals. You see a huge downturn in police response. Rob Sheben gets a lot less calls. You see Travis's job getting a lot easier, maybe Teresa's job getting a little bit easier, because people that are inside, they have way fewer problems than people who are outside. This is gonna be an upfront cost for Missoula, and it's a little different than the indirect cost that we pay now. You know, St. Pat's, $4.5 million taking care of homeless people. Rob's department spends plenty of its time and money dealing with people out on the streets. We spend a lot of money as a social service community responding to the conditions created by being on the streets, and that can be mental health care or physical health care. The person who sleeps outside 365 days a year, they are not as healthy as the person who is indoors. So those are huge costs to us, and the evidence is in. If you put people inside, you will spend less money in both the short term and the long term, and then fortunately, you will have done both the morally correct thing and the economically correct thing. So this is something that's gonna get moved up more quickly, I think, in our community. It's gonna take a massive public-private effort to make it work. It's gonna take collaborations and partnerships that we have talked about here a little bit today. Everybody's gonna have to be on board. It's not gonna be one place. Western Montana Mental Health is not gonna be the sole place that makes this thing run. It's gonna take the hospital, it's gonna take the pub, it's gonna take Reaching Home, it's gonna take the food bank, it's gonna take a lot of different partners. The good thing about this is that we live in a town when it recognizes a need, it finds a way to get things done. One day we woke up in this town and said, Jesus, what we need is a bunch of hand-carved horses that can go around in a circle. And you know what? We did it. So I think in a town that can look downtown and say, this is not the downtown that we want to have, and it's not acceptable to us, then we can find a way to move past that. And I think that wet housing is going to be a big part of that path. And we don't offer it as a panacea. It's not going to solve every single problem. You know, Teresa and Yo and Travis and Marnie, you know the people out there. We're not gonna get every single person in. There's always gonna be a project for Teresa out on the streets and for Travis out on the streets. Hopefully not for Rob, but maybe. But that's a group of people that, to whatever extent we bring them indoors, we're gonna have a lot better outcomes, both for them and for the community as well. So I'm so tired of the sound of my own voice, so I'm gonna pass it off.
Travis?
Yeah. So the outreach program that I coordinate launched in June of 2011. And in a nutshell, what we do is we build relationships and we connect people to services. What does that actually look like? One of the key relationships I have is with a payee named Marty Brown, and I really started understanding some of the barriers by working with some of her clients. And one particular client had been kicked out of a lot of motel rooms, and so what I started doing was talking to motel managers and trying to build some relationships, saying, hey, you know, if he had the support of the outreach team, would you consider letting him back in? And if there's behavior issues, you know, we can be responsive to that. One of the challenges with the motel system is it's really expensive, and you don't necessarily get, you know, checks even from a payee that they will accept. And so what this individual had to do is he had to take a pretty sizable check to a bank, and then the bank would cash it, and then he would have to get that money to the motel. Well, a lot can happen from the bank to the motel. And a lot of challenges, whether it's him engaging in drinking or people targeting him because they know that he has money, he just came from the payee. And so one simple thing we started doing was accompany him from the bank to the motel. He has been in the one particular motel for the entire winter now, and it's been really successful. I mean, he pays $640 from a $720 disability check to stay in this motel. It's not a very nice motel, but it's the level of housing that he's able to access. And simple things, I think, are challenges for a lot of the folks we work with. One of the most significant things that creates barriers is missing appointments. There was another client that we've had some challenges with and has a possibility to work with the treatment court. And I contacted Hannah just earlier today and said, you know, what's the disconnect? And she said he hasn't made any appointments. And so we have an appointment, and we're going to have to triage to get him to that appointment. And it might take significant, you know, time to just locate him and then to walk him to this appointment. But when you miss appointments, it can be a huge barrier. If you're not responding to letters from the Missoula Housing Authority, you can get dropped off waiting lists you might have spent 8 months to a year on to try and get access to subsidized housing. So there's a lot of challenges. But one of the things that we've looked at doing is not just building relationships with people on the streets, building relationships with everyone, whether that's law enforcement, so that when there are safety concerns, I can, contact the downtown officer and say, hey, this person is really, causing some concerns, some threats to his own safety and to others. We work more within the hospital system now, so we can help with discharges. The social workers at the hospital know that they can call us, and we can actually provide some transportation. So we can connect them, to medication. We can bring them back to the POV. We've also been helping discharges from the neurobehavioral unit at the Providence Center, and it's just a continuum of care that allows us to build relationships and provide some just simple things like transportation that'll make it a little bit easier for them to connect to services. So really, the relationship building and the collaboration has been really key. My job is actually great because I get to go into situations where there's so much frustration, I can't really fail because the failure is already so acute that anything I do is probably going to slightly improve the situation. And so really my job is to go to, I think, where there's the most frustration and try and understand the dynamics, and then to raise some awareness about what we can do moving forward to I think, lessen the impact both on people that are experiencing homelessness and then the resources, the sort of drain on resources that happens when we are ineffectively reacting to the need through the emergency room and through the jail. So I think we're at a point now where there's a lot of interest to see what can happen. And it's actually a great point to be in, having the 10-year plan starting to get implemented. We have a lot of great momentum that we need to continue building on. So I'm pretty excited about the relationships that are being built right now and the interest in how we can improve the system. So. His rocking chairs are unstable.
Well, here's what I hear. I hear the four of us are pretty much all on the same page. I know there's probably some of you thinking, did these guys get all together and come up with, so everybody's saying the same thing? And I can tell you we did not. So we're all on the same page, and I think I could say we're really lucky because we're a lucky community that we have folks that are all on the same page wanting to get things done and handled. Everybody has their little tasks, and we work together to do it. I mean, I hope we've painted the picture now that it is which everybody here in this room knows what a complex problem it is that requires complex solutions to fix it. But we're all on the same page, and we're a very lucky community. So I want to just digress just 1 minute. Marnie made up a good point about, we talked about that 10 to 15, 20% of the transient population or the shelter-resistant folks. I just want to make it clear that Marnie did bring up a good point, and I thought it was worth repeating, that just in itself, just that lifestyle in itself does not necessarily have more contact with law enforcement because of that lifestyle. Marty made a good point that a lot of those folks that live at maybe an anti-establishment, maybe that's not the right term, but they want to live a kind of a mountain man existence maybe. We don't necessarily have more contact with folks like that want to live that lifestyle. So I just wanted to make that clear, everybody. We were all on the same page with that. There are folks that live that lifestyle that cause no grief, that don't have behavioral issues. And again, we talked about this term of undesirable behaviors. So I see our police department as having two responsibilities: public safety, to make sure everybody in this room is safe. Okay, that's number one priority. And number 1A priority is to make sure we have the knowledge, which encompasses training, to provide assistance to help those that need help, right? Because we get called, we're the first responders, we get called really for everything under the sun. So when we get called, it could be a medical condition issue, but we still respond. And generally, we are probably the first ones to respond. So we have to know what to say, what to do, and how to give people those resources. So I'll use this word again, this collaboration. So what we do is, and I've been very lucky to kind of be the police department spokesperson for this, in a sense that I am the one that's collaborating with a bunch of groups. I mentioned the Mayor's Downtown Advisory Committee. I'm also the representative for the CIT group here in Missoula as well.
And what is CIT?
I'm glad you asked that. I'm gonna give you just the book definition of it. It's local initiatives designed to improve the way law enforcement and the community respond to people experiencing mental health crises. They're built on strong partnerships between law enforcement, mental health provider agencies, and individuals and families affected by mental illness. So I go to those meetings monthly, and one of the solutions that we recently came up with is a trifold that we give to people in mental health crisis, as well as we use it ourselves. and it has about every services that Missoula has. And we're a lucky community, because I can tell you, we barely fit it on a trifold card, front and back. So lots of good stuff to hand out, and it also empowers the law enforcement to say, this person is experiencing this, I'm gonna pick up the phone and call. So it gives us the ability to help, because again, we are the first responders, and we truly are the jack of all trades, because we have to be, and because it can be something as a mental health crisis all the way to an ambulance call, and then we have to pass that along to the ambulance folks. So I'm also the representative of the police department on the 10-year plan that Michael has spoken about. We're very, very lucky, or my department, or I'm very lucky and we're very lucky to have a representative that does all this stuff for the police department. We're about 100 strong for Missoula, which is, considered a good-sized police department nationwide, believe it or not, even though you look at places like New York that have 40,000 police officers. Once you start hitting triple digits around 100, it's considered a fairly good-sized department. So we're very lucky that I am being able to do this and representing the police department, because again, it's all about knowing what other groups are doing to help folks, so we can kind of get in on that as well. We also have a dedicated downtown footbeat / bicycle officer. And again, his goal is to work downtown. Downtown's a pretty big place in Missoula, even though we still consider ourselves a pretty small town. And Officer Andy Roy's responsibility is to get to know the folks, so we can do more than just the typical police work. And I'm very lucky. I do more than the typical police work as well. I call it non-traditional police work, thinking outside the box, being able to do things like helping writing ordinances and things like that. I'm only one of 2 people in the whole state of Montana that do what I do, so we're very lucky here that I have that opportunity to do that. So I talked about our training. It's very important that we have training for the officers to know how to do this stuff. We have lots of officers that are CIT trained. That's a 40-hour course.
What does CIT stand for?
Crisis Intervention Team.
Oh.
So there's lots of officers that are trained through that 40-hour training. So they know what to do in crisis situations. So it's very also important to learn how to avoid personal injury and the use of excess force when you don't have to. When obviously police has changed over the years, and we all think of, like when my dad was a child in the 1930s, it was, you think of the cop on the beat with the nightstick, and things have totally changed. We use our minds and we use our mouths probably more than anything nowadays. And so anyway, with that said, I'm going to stop using mine.
All right. So questions, discussion about where we are and what's going on now. Yeah.
Would any one of you mind expanding on the relationship of secure housing to mental health and behavioral issues?
Secure housing?
The relationship between secure housing and mental health.
Michael, do you mean housing that is secure, or like somebody's ability to access housing?
No, I'm sorry. I
Okay.
didn't phrase it. Thank you. Where people feel safe and secure.
Sure.
And stable.
Yeah, I could try to answer that. And kind of thinking about what stable housing would produce as a benefit. Just taking medication, getting access to medication, following up on medical appointments, all of the basic day-to-day stuff is so much more difficult to do when you're wondering if your pack is still going to be there when you get back to camp. Losing personal belongings is something that happens all of the time, and that can really disrupt a person's ability to access services. You lose your ID. In this day and age, post 9/11, getting your ID back is incredibly challenging. Getting money to get a birth certificate is incredibly challenging. And so when you don't have stable housing, when you don't have a place that's safe for you and then it's safe to store your belongings, nothing really good follows from that. It's just a very disordered way of living that is incredibly challenging to stay up on any kind of maintenance of your personal life. And so that's where you start seeing the Housing First model is being able to provide some stability, and then you start working on the underlying issues. People will drink less if they are not drinking to pass out on a sidewalk. They will do less harm to themselves if they have that stability. And then you know where to find them, and you can get them appointments. It's really challenging to just locate people sometimes to get them to the appointments. And I've spent hours trying to track someone down because I know seeing that provider is going to give them the assessment that's going to give them access to resources that if they don't make that appointment, it might be weeks or months to get back in touch with the providers that are going to help them. So I think that's where you see secure, stable housing as being the first step into addressing some of the underlying issues that people are experiencing.
I'd just say, whoops, sorry about that. We're fortunate in this town that our primary mental health agency, Western Montana Mental Health, has an interest in being in the housing business. I know that sometimes Mel Mason laments being in the housing business at times, but Patty Kent is a pretty fierce advocate and wrangler of federal dollars to build housing. And it's Rob, he's been a problem the whole hour.
So Rob that works here.
I know, it's not. But it's pretty easy to compare the outcomes for people who live in housing that Western Montana Mental Health has put up with the outcomes of people who live like Marnie lived for a while. I mean, it's literally, it's a night and day situation. I was really happy here a couple of weeks ago. Western Montana Mental Health broke ground on 8 new apartments over off Dakota Street. And, some people said, well, is that the best use of $800,000, blah, 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 blah. The fact is, it's 8 places where people who could be living on the streets and are gonna have titanically bad outcomes will have better outcomes. And so that money, you start looking at it, the price of a homeless person on the street, $25,000 a year, doesn't take you very long to get to $800,000. So Michael's point is a good one, that any kind of housing, and particularly housing that comes with supportive services, leads to way, way better outcomes. It's expensive, but it's more expensive to not do it. Yes, ma'am.
I came late, maybe you talked about this. How big is the new Poverello?
Well, when you're talking about square footage, it's not significantly increased in square footage. We're just going to be using our square footage more effectively, but we'll be able to comfortably sleep up to 120 people. Currently, our building is not supposed to have more than 100 people. This past year, I don't know what dynamics have led to such a huge increase in people needing services, but even this month, which is traditionally a little bit less population because it's warmer weather, we've had over 100 people for at least half of this month. And so there's a tremendous need, and it's a lot of people that you would see downtown walking around and you wouldn't see them as visibly recognizable as a homeless individual. I think that's one of the challenges in perception, and Michael's talked about the fact that he could house 85% of the folks that are homeless, and no one would know it because it's that 15% of the population that gets all the attention. If I didn't work at the POV, I wouldn't recognize half of the people that I see in my day-to-day that I know are accessing services. So we're serving a lot of people, and we'll continue to be able to, I think, meet the need with short-term shelter. And we want to continue just being that short-term shelter and really connecting people as quickly as possible to the services that will help them be sustainable in the community and move them from our temporary housing opportunity in the POV to stable permanent housing.
Will you be able to continue to use the old POV as well as the new?
No, the building will be sold, and I think they're going to actually change it, like maybe develop it into condos or something. I'm not entirely sure, but
That is correct.
But we will be outside of the downtown core. We'll be on West Broadway. That's going to provide different challenges. We have a huge expectation to do some targeted outreach with the west side and north side neighborhoods, because there's still some pretty significant concerns about what that relocation is going to mean for people in that immediate area. And we are not going to be serving people under the influence in the same way that we have in our current facility. And that's something that's really important for people to understand. For the past 3 years, we have had a weather policy that allows us to have people under the influence staying when it's 20 degrees and colder in the winter months. And that's not sustainable for us to continue doing. It puts a huge challenge on the residents that are abiding by our rules and by our staff to deal with folks that are, probably have co-occurring mental health issues and are self-medicating with substances. And so we really need that community-based solution because the Poverty Center has done what we can to try and alleviate the burden on other first responders and the ER and the jail when it comes to people needing help in the winter months. So that's gonna be a bit different in our new facility. Our new facility is also gonna be easier sell for me when I'm doing my job and trying to get people into services. It's gonna be a lot easier to say, hey, come to a facility that's a dignified space with the appropriate ADA compliant shower facilities that doesn't have bed bugs and isn't falling apart and smelly with black mold. I mean, our current facility is not a dignified space for people. And that's one of the challenges right now of getting folks into services because they don't want to be in a confined space with a lot of people with a lot of different challenges. Just walking into our building for the first time when it's that crowded, if you have any level of anxiety from traumatic stress or from underlying mental health issues, it's a challenging place to be for any given length of time. And so that's been one of the barriers, just the inadequate space that we have. And the best thing that we've been able to do to show exemplify the need for a new facility is just give people tours of our current facility. Once someone has come into our facility and seen what we're trying to do in the space, they quickly realize that we need a more appropriate space. So I'm excited to see what the new space is going to be able to do in terms of increasing interest in people seeing what we might be able to do for them. So it'll be great to see. We're very, very excited. We need it badly.
So is there now or will there be like safe storage facility for homeless people that are on the street, but maybe it would be nice if they had a place to keep their birth certificate, et cetera?
That's a great question because that's something that would be simple and would have a huge positive impact. Having some kind of public storage, public lockers that people could access at relatively low cost. That's not something that we're going to be doing for people that aren't enrolled in our program. That's something we've talked about at the community level that it would help cut down on the theft that happens. But the storage of personal belongings, that's some of the feedback we've gotten from people that are resistant to staying with us, is that theft within our facility is pretty consistent. We do our best to keep things locked up and to keep eyes on personal belongings. But if you see our overflow space where people's belongings are kept, it is a total mess. It's overcrowded. We have little pieces of tape that you have to put your name on so that we know that you're getting into the right belongings. But with over 100 people and staff, it's a big challenge. In our new facility, we'll have lockers that people can access on their own with I think a key code. And that alone is going to free up our staff to actually do more work with connecting people to services so they're not tied up with the logistics of opening up lockers for people. So the personal belongings is a big part of, I think, the instability that people experience, like I said, on the streets, not being able to keep their belongings safe. And when you lose a few key items, whether that's medication or ID, it's a huge destabilizing effect. Yes, Mary?
I have a comment about that particular situation because there are people who go around the country from one shelter to another, and wouldn't it be just really nice to be for 30 days in Missoula? That's just one thing. That's the thing that I have direct knowledge of is the amount of that a person can accept of the control in the program. One person I know who was a vet and had a regular discharge went to the Valor House, and he had three different programs: the vet, the Missoula Housing Authority, and Western Montana Mental Health. And he was answerable to all of those programs. And he had 2 case managers in one of those programs, and he made it through all of them, all of the hoops, all of the things, all of the people that he talked to. And when he got through with it, he went and got good and drunk. And he said, it's all his fault. I said, no, I don't really think so. I was amazed that he made it through. I said, you were pushed a bit. The other person was in share house. The control factor has a lot to do with people rejecting the help. the other person was in share house, and I was just amazed and pleased and happy. And I saw the person back on the street, and not really that drunk, but, you know, I said, well, what happened? And he said, well, he said before he really broke some people's necks, he had to get out of there. I don't know about share house. Share house wasn't mentioned in this. And I've heard good things, and people have had good outcomes there. But there are some people that it doesn't make any difference if you're going to have a wet house or what have you. They had a place over on, I don't remember the name of the street, but I didn't go there for people at the winter before last. And they made a terrible mess. They didn't take care of things themselves. They didn't do what they should do. And I thought, well, you know, it shows to go that you got help and you abused it. So where are we gonna go from here? So it's a terrible problem, but I think you need to get the people who are involved in the situation together in a group and talking with each other and talking with an adequate counselor and have regulations that are reasonable and case managers that are qualified.
And one of the things that we look at, because you know, you're right, Mary, and what Michael said is that we're not going to, you know, solve every single individual case because there are going to be people that are continually resistant to that. But if we had, for example, a physical location, a 24-hour drop-in center that was short-term, that was sort of like stabilization, so like a 3-day stabilization, it would be great to be able to take someone that's resistant to all that and to be able to take them to a place that's not the ER and not the jail, that has some adequate staffing, that can be a little bit, I think, less controlling. The jail is dealing with a lot of stuff that I don't think they should be dealing with. The challenges within the jail and the ER are significant. And I think if we had a 24-hour drop-in center, it'd be user-friendly for providers to be able to take someone and drop someone off like they're doing in Billings. Right now, we had a situation just yesterday where someone was discharged from jail, and Teresa didn't get a chance to meet with this individual, and so this person was decompensated within the jail system, was released, and then was a danger to himself and others. He wasn't allowed to access our services because of violation out. We had called police because he was in our facility and would not leave. Luckily, he left on his own, and Teresa connected with him and walked him over to the ER with one of our practicum students. Our practicum student stayed with him for over 4 hours, waiting for a mental health professional to respond and assess him. There were several times where this individual almost left against medical advice, and our student was able to talk to him and just keep him there. He's now in the place that's most appropriate for him. He's being stabilized, but there was many opportunities yesterday where he could have done something to hurt himself or others. He walked out into traffic, and was almost hit. He was very focused on a theft that had happened, and Teresa's work with him was amazing in just redirecting him and getting him to the place that was going to best meet his needs. But there could be more work and more collaboration we can do. He could have been discharged directly from jail to Dakota Place. You know, so there are ways that we can look at better continuum of care so that we don't have a person that just wanted to get back on medication, wanted to, but did not know how to go about accessing it himself, and was sort of put out on the streets in a manner that you know, could have been a lot worse, but it turned out good yesterday. There are situations that don't turn out good. You know, the individual that was hit by a train and killed, you know, we knew him, we're working with him, and he had been in and out of jail on petty issues. You know, alcohol was a barrier for him, so he couldn't access our services, and it was challenging to see him move through the systems and not to have an adequate, you know, place that he could go to be stabilized when he wanted to. And it's a big challenge, but everyone's open now to figure out how we can work together. And that's been the encouraging part. And so we are, to echo what Rob said, we're very lucky to be in a community that's looking at the solutions in a way that will produce those better outcomes.
Thank you. And we're about out of time. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists for being here today. Let's give them a good round of appreciation. The message for today is collaboration is the way to go, and to just have lots of different levels of interventions to be able to intervene when we need to with whoever is there to help if it's the right person. So thank you all for all your efforts, and thank you very much for coming.
Yeah, thanks for having us.